My name is Mato, and if that sounds familiar, unfortunately, this isn't my first time having to post here. Way back when, in internet terms that is, really it's only been a few months or so, I used to be a fairly well-known cursed game streamer. I mean, as well-known as you can be, casting to some of the gloomier spots of the dark web. That is, until a handful of, I want to say, anarchists showed up and decided to start breaking parts of me, thinking I was some kind of dollar store Andre Toulon and in possession of a bunch of killer toys or something. I wasn't. But those idiots managed to rile up one of the dangerous pieces of pasta I had, and all hell broke loose. Cue the man driving the literal 1970 station wagon I'm currently in, Rick. Saved my ass. Probably saved the asses of most people in the surrounding block as well. Took out 3 armed, if not trained psychopaths, letting me get the creepy aspects of things under control. He won't come out and say what his previous job was, but he's a nasty middle-aged guy, scarred in ways that Oxford and myself can't match. Now, after Rick found me, we found Oxford, a thin, balding guy not much older than myself, but with a real old soul vibe. He loves stuff. He even knows how to find the light bulb for an easy bake oven made in the 1930s in about 15 minutes. And picked up the wrong houseware one day and had the eyes blanched in his skull in an attempt to subdue some evil shit within it. While all 3 of us had our separate standoffs with the supernatural, there was a strange common thread, a cult called the Husk of M, Rick's ghost, the tip-off to my psychos, and the call that got Oxford to start a pissing contest with a poltergeist. They had their hands in all of it. There are probably hundreds, if not thousands of victims of the Husk of M that Rick could have saved, but he had a plan. His part is obvious. No need to delve into it. He's a scary guy who knows scary guys. Me? Beyond being the designated mouthpiece of the group to the World Wide Web, I can get my hands on any kind of cursed, haunted, or anomalous media you can think of, and come from a long line of folks that have been known for the ability to get along with the creepier things on Earth. Oxford. He can get things, just all kinds of things. Tractor parts, homemade bullets, bulk MSG. If it is an object and we need it, he'll have it quicker than eBay. And after a bit of education, seems pretty good hunting down objects of a more esoteric nature. Separate paths to the same destination. One that took us weeks to find the name of and months to finally track down. The Chimera House. The twisted project of the Husk of M, and where their leadership spent the majority of their time. See, the Huskers believe some weird shit. And I know, saying that about a cult seems like the kind of thing you'd do to pass an essay, but I mean really strange, out there garbage. We live in a world of the supernatural. I was lucky enough to be pretty much born understanding that in some tiny way. Not so much for Rick and Oxford. The Huskers, they've been a cult for a long time. We're talking before the United States, before gunpowder. And if the least likely of our sources is right, before bronze. They knew about the dark side of the world, they understood it and recorded it. And unlike the leave-only footprints policy folks like my parents adopt, they bent those forces and creatures to their will for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Back when they weren't the Husk of M, they went by many names, but they hadn't found the M. But in 1934 that changed. Their philosophy began to revolve around beings they said weren't just paranormal, but things that were beyond all concepts of God we can imagine. Beings that wore bodies like gloves and left entire reality scraped clean of life. Mortal, God, and monster. They began to buy haunted homes and malls. They purchased cursed objects by the truckload and had insane filmmakers recording mind-warping media 24 hours a day. The Husk of M needed all of this haunted errata to somehow hasten the arrival of their gods beyond gods. Now, like all cults, they are extremely full of shit, but in the most dangerous way possible. They've taken segments of haunted buildings, bound them together with cursed masonry, filled it with the most evil objects on Earth, and ensnared the worst entities they could find within its walls. It's been around for decades, and no sign of their gods, but what there is plenty of is innocent corpses and twisted bastards with amused grins. I wish I could say that the plan we came up with was foolproof, but the more we delved into the Chimera house, the more layers and ripples we found. Don't confuse trauma for bravery, though, guys. Each one of us wanted to move on from this, take our lumps and get back to whatever past were normal in our day-to-day lives. But we couldn't. The soul-crushing knowledge that your life can be turned upside down to this extent by individuals that face no consequences, it was more than we could handle. So, it's into the belly of the beast, or more accurately at the moment, the gates of hell. Come on, man, you've got to tell me something. We're chronicling this so folks can maybe learn here. They want to know about you, I say to Rick, as we drive down a barren highway in Why Am I Here, Ontario. I was a plumber, the stoic man lies. Was that your hitman name? I say, trying to get a reaction. He smiles. Oh, hitman, listen to you. What do you think, Oxford? I seem like a hitman? No, a slasher villain for sure, Oxford replies. We share a chuckle, and I note the deflection, literally, I guess, as you guys are listening to it right now. Our destination is an abandoned church, staffed by 2 members of the Catholic faith off books enough to have ties with friends of Rick. A plumber knows how to get fake passports, I say, not letting the topic drop. The drive has been long and boring. Just about the only thing I have to do besides give myself an ulcer thinking about what we might find when we get to the Burns Church is troll Rick. Oxford got the square punch for the pictures. Is he a hitman? Rick replies. The conversation for the next 30 minutes or so is a series of minor variations on this line of questioning. Me knowing I'm not getting answers. Rick knowing I won't stop asking. The place is well kept. Only a few windows showing some minor cracks, or hastily replaced panes of glass sitting not quite flush. We pull into the overgrown driveway, weeds thumping on the inner side of our car like the grasping hands of the dead. Not a house, not a shed, not a tree for miles. Just this Gothic-spired tiny church miles outside of the nearest town. A dim light shines in the rectory, our contacts, divine and mundane, doing their best not to attract attention. Though who the hell might be out here spying on a church that hasn't been used since the 90s is beyond me. Rick opens the door. I see 4 men. In the middle are 2 priests. One is tanned, has short black hair and in his mid-20s. The other is ancient, 80s at least, both in full garb, looking nervous and somewhat indignant. That would likely be due to the 2 gentlemen flanking either side of the large oak desk the priests were behind. Rick's contacts, 2 jean-wearing jacket men with half-beards, bikers if I had to guess, and not the CEO on the weekend kind. Smitty, Mouse, long time no see, Rick says, shaking hands and exchanging a large wad of cash from a seemingly endless supply. Weird, damn Rick, all I gotta say, Mouse says. Weird pays the bills, though, Rick replies, clapping the man on the back. We have it covered from here. The 2 men seem more than happy to leave, and I can understand why. This place has an oppressive, almost toxic atmosphere. Some buried impulse in the back of my mind screams at me to run. Rick turns on some lights, walking around, inspecting the small room almost as if he's looking to purchase the place. With the lights on, I can see the younger man has a split lip and a blood stain below his nose. I've never been the most religious guy. Guess it comes with the territory. But seeing the fallout of our little quest for revenge doesn't make me feel good about myself. We sit. An awkward silence shared between everyone but Rick. The young priest starts. Stop right there. What we need from you is the how, not a debate. Rick interrupts. I don't like this at all. I have no delusions that we're going to save the world or anything, but this doesn't seem right. What the hell, Rick? Maybe give the guy a little respect? I blurt out. Rick looks as shocked as I do. You think you're gonna get what we need? You see his face. This guy is stubborn, Rick says. I wave him away and pull my chair forward. The priest looks at me with contempt. I'm Mato, I say, taking a moment to give Rick a nasty look. I'm Father Summers. My superior is Father Donetto, the young priest says. Guys, personally, I thought this was going to be a bribe situation if I knew we would be beating up priests. Again, I look back toward Rick. If he has shame, he isn't showing it. I'd have found another way of doing things. But we need your help. From what we've been told, you two are in charge of something that can point us in the direction we need to go. Nowhere it points do you want to go? The old man says. His accent is thick but nearly impossible to place. Well, we are charged with this thought by some in the church to be none other than Lucifer himself. Me, I don't believe it, and neither do the vast majority of those with knowledge of such things. That being said, it's old, powerful, and vile enough that it does a damn fine impersonation. There are 18 members of our order at the moment. 2 are assigned watch over the hellspawn in this basement. Make of that what you will, Mato. The young priest is somber. I see knowledge in his eyes and make my insight look like trivia. Sounds like we're dealing with something worse than we've come across, but we don't want to release it. We don't want to do anything, really. We just need to ask it a few questions. We get torn up or possessed down there, then that's on us. And I'm sure Rick can give you guys some compensation for the way he went about things. My reply is level. Rick looks impatient. You are risking more than your lives. I can see it on you 3. You've been up against the foot soldiers of Satan, but those of his kingdom with true power, they can take your soul as easily as your life. We heed the warnings as much as you'd assume and are led to the dark red oak door of a basement. The half-dozen locks are black steel, stout and antique-looking. No window, no slot for food. Nothing to indicate this is anything more than a root cellar or workshop. The priests refuse to enter, saying they have to limit their contact with the evil contained within. I try not to think about what that might mean for us. The walls of the room are covered in layers of ancient Bible pages, yellowing, torn, and written in dozens of different languages. The dim ceiling lights are behind inches of lucite engraved with overlapping layers of religious iconography. At one end of the room sits a table with a collection of religious artifacts, scapulars, goblets, silver-lined censers, along with a few objects I'm sure Rick could tell me the use of. At the other, chained to the wall by his arms with massive iron shackles, is a man. If this is who we are led to believe, the pose his imprisonment is forcing on him is, ironically, Christ-like. He wears only a pair of faded, torn dress pants. His skin is deathly pale and marked with cuts, burns, and lesions of all forms. The man's teeth are yellow and black, chipped and cracked. His hair hangs down to the floor, obscuring most of his features, but we can see a slight grin. We shut the door, and the feeling of evil and wrong That pressure threatening to break our sense of purpose and determination is a physical sensation. I expect Rick to walk right up and start in on whoever this is, but the look on his face is no different from mine. Fear. Pure, basic, instinctual fear. Seems like we have some things to discuss. The man's voice is phlegmatic and pained, but it carries with it a sense of power beyond the frail shell we see in front of us. Rick and Oxford are both stunned, unable to speak. Not to say that I'm feeling particularly brave myself, but it seems I'm the only one able to reply. We do, I say. The sound of flies seems to come from some sourceless spot around the room. And what do you three wise men have to offer me? Blood? Gold? Devotion? These words seem to foul the air. The smell of rot and sulfur becomes choking. I press on. What do you want? I try to take a deep breath to calm myself and wind up nearly doubling over, coughing and gagging. The possessed man slowly raises his head. Greasy, blood-caked hair falling away from his face. He cocks his head to the side at an angle no person could hope to accomplish. You should know what I want. You've been told who I am. The speaking shell of a person replies. I can feel this situation devolving quickly. Whatever the thing in front of me is, its will is starting to worm its way into my mind. If I had a dime for every entity that claimed to be Old Scratch, I would have had a better security system, and I wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. It takes everything in me to blurt this out, but it seems to stop the slow encroachment I feel in my mind. The chained man inhales. His lungs sound about 2 days away from collapse. He seems to contemplate something before speaking. Oh, that explains it. It's been a long time since I've been in the same room as one of your kind. Well, maybe I am he, maybe not, but you feel it, don't you? Even if you are not as enraptured as your friends. This makes me realize something. I look to Rick and Oxford. They stand rigid, slowly turning blue. Before I can ask, the demon says, "Breathe," in a haunting, echoing tone at odds with the half-dead rattle we've been conversing in. Rick and Oxford fall to their knees, heaving in deep breaths of the foul air. The sheer power of the thing in front of me presses down on me like the weight of the ocean. I get it, but if you have that kind of power, what can we offer you? My tone is level, though I have no idea how. The lives of the two cowards upstairs, comes the blunt reply to my question. But I know that is something you will not give. My freedom would have to be my next offer. Oxford is struggling to stand, but Rick seems to have regained some of his senses. Kid, you're making a literal deal with the devil here, he says between coughs. Oh, does that offend you, Renaud? Do you have issues with the devil? Good to know child killers have their limits, misplaced as they may be. The chained man laughs hysterically, slamming his head against the wall, phlegm and blood dripping from his mouth. Rick, or Renaud, snaps, fear, toxic air, or no, he draws a pistol aiming it at the chained thing. Missing folks in hell, I take it, he growls to the possessed body. Rick, holy shit, man, put that away. This body could be the only thing keeping whatever is in it in this basement confined. I don't know enough about this, but this isn't a risk to take, I plead. No, pull the trigger, Renaud. Never been something you've had a problem with. So, what will you tell these two? That it was a mistake? Well, one, maybe, a stray bullet. A flame fan in the wrong direction could happen to anyone. But 3, well, Rennie, that isn't a mistake. That's a career choice. The last sentence the chained man says in a deep, otherworldly tone full of threat. Rick's eyes are wide and his hand is shaken. The trigger is half pulled and I brace for the noise of the gun going off. We both get what you were and what you may have done, Oxford says. You know what he's doing. This seems to get through to Rick. He lowers the pistol, body trembling with rage and fear. Oxford, that is some chutzpah you're showing. What exactly is it you think I'm doing? The creature looks to the blind man, staring into eyes that can't return the favor. The direct attention from the demon strips Oxford of his bravado. Typical entity head games is what he'd say if you'd let him win, I interject. The chained evil pays me no mind. Renaud's shame was historical, but you, Oxford, your shame, it's potential. It hasn't happened, but it will. The thing is clearly enjoying this. Oxford stays silent. I can't tell if he's frozen or staring down the half-rotten shell, but either way, he has my respect. The 4 of us are silent. We can feel this pact or deal balancing on a razor's edge, one side having nothing to lose, the other having the ability to take everything. There's a noise from upstairs, splintering wood, breaking glass maybe. A low, dark laugh from the bound evil. Oh, no, Matteo. I'm not one of your pasta. I don't have to leech fear and confusion to exist. I have no need for head games. Think horses, not zebra. Some of me may be here, bound to this crumbling shell of a man, but I still see. I still know. I just needed a little time to solidify my bargaining position. Oxford, your friend, has been following the three of you for a long time. And in about 4 minutes or so, we will be walking into this room. Those false crusaders upstairs won't be able to put up much of a fight. You have about that long to decide how much you are willing to help me. One chain is my final offer. To you, they are nothing more than iron. I eventually release myself by my own hand, stop that malnourished relative of mine, and give you the location of the windmill you want so badly. Everyone wins. For a moment, as the demon talks, I see it. Just a flash, the true face of what we are dealing with. Screams, echoing laughter, and wet spraying sounds from upstairs. A sourceless wind begins to pick up as Bible pages begin to fall from the wall. Several seem to drift over, and texts beginning to form in sick red lettering on their blank backs. The air is charged with impending evil. The little I know of words like this tells me they're beginning to fail. Tick, tock, boys. Once that door opens, I'll have a much more accommodating business partner. The chained man begins to crawl slowly up the wall, no force of nature propelling his journey. He perches halfway up, spider-like, lording down upon us as the contract hovers on a bone-reeking updraft. Oxford begins to feel along the walls, disoriented. I can't make a decision. Rick stands with pistol drawn, looking between the demon and the door. Our blind friend grabs the ankle of the demon, like a penitent begging for salvation. I'll do it. You win, he says, looking up at the perched entity. I try and tell him he can't even read the contract, but as a long black quill appears in his hand and the rising storm of ethereal force begins to subside, I feel the deal has already been made. Oxford scrawls a signature in the middle of a page as the chained shell slides down the wall. Deftly, Oxford produces a small multi-tool. He fumbles around the legion-dotted arm of the possessed man till he finds the shackle. Something is walking down the stairs, footsteps heavy as gunshots. Oxford flips out a small, stout awl and begins to work it under the head of the bolt sealing the cuff. The thing coming down the stairs hums a tune that makes me think of tumbleweeds and cowboys. Rust flakes from the decades-old bolt, but quarter inch by quarter inch the blind auctioneer moves it, until finally it hits the ground. Its ringing seems to go on much longer than it should in a small, cramped room. The chained thing flexes its free arm, grabbing Oxford's hand. It slowly leans in. "Thank you," it says, as the stout, safe-like door is ripped off of its hinges. All three of us move to the far side of the room, leaving a clear path between what may be the King of Lies and the Mortician. The thing in the doorway could not be mistaken for a man, despite the relative similarity in size and shape. It has waxen skin like turned lard, clawed gray nails and deep blue eyes, broken by bits of white like passing clouds. It wore a short-brimmed black hat and waistcoat, but these ink-black items seemed just as much a part of its body as its flesh and bone. It points a gore-soaked hand at Oxford and is about to speak when a force, direct and unimpeded, grabs it, dragging it over to the chained demon. The Mortician is confused, powerless, bound to the physical realm and in the sights of something with ethereal power. Pieces begin to break free from the sky-eyed entity. Its face is shock, pain, and surprise. And strangely, Oxford is the first to run. I'd have assumed he'd have wanted to be around when the thing that lost him his sight was taken out. Before I follow suit, I make a moment of eye contact with the chained thing. There is a look of joy in its eyes that seems off. Not that I spend too much time pondering this. Rick and myself quickly catch up to Oxford and help guide the man as far away from whatever we helped to unleash as possible. The first floor is a charnel house. The walls are splattered with gore. The room is a torn-apart pile of splinters, plaster, and glass. The two priests hang from the ceiling, opened like mail and left hanging, empty, eyeless, and with what is left of their faces twisted in eternal agony. Oxford gives us the location of the Chimera house as we begin to pull away, but for the next hour or so, as we make our way back to the States, the massive sedan is silent. "I was in a private military for a while," Rick starts. "The night is late, but we have no intentions of stopping. And the best way to put it is that it was a lateral damn career move. Man, don't worry about it. That thing was just screwing with us," I reply. "Probably, but you deserve to know who you're bunked with. It was full of psychopaths, idiots, and kids. And I had the misfortune of having 3 people under me who fit all 3 categories. 3 18-year-old hotheads, full of conspiracy theory rage, and the kind of heartlessness that comes with being that young and told to kill. Rules of war, with suggestions to groups like us. But most of the people there were ex-military, and we had some hard lines we wouldn't cross. Not these kids. One day, the leadership decided they were more trouble than they were worth, and taking care of the problem fell to me. It needed to be done, but it ain't something I'm proud of. In other circumstances, it could have been given a dishonorable discharge and a prison sentence. It maybe changed a couple of decades down the road. But that wasn't in the cards. Rick isn't much for eye contact, but the look of loss and regret he gives me nearly has the weight of the room we escaped. 3 days of straight travel, sleeping in the oversized car and running through our plan, held together with duct tape and hope as it is. We barely have time to eat or sleep. The Chimera house is in a constant state of flux. the density of paranormal energy making its very location an ever-changing thing. And we sure as hell, pun half intended, have no plans of going back to that basement to ask where it moved to. So, I guess now would be a good time to go over the plan. I've been talking about it enough. We've boiled the situation down to 3 problems: people, spirits, and effect. We quickly figured out that trying to completely shut down the husk of M, or even the Chimera house itself, wasn't going to happen. But that isn't our plan. Our goal is to throw a wrench into the works, make a bunch of noise, and get the husk of M out of the shadows. I have no contacts, but I do know there are people out there whose whole lives are devoted to combating things like this. We can't take the Huskers down, but maybe they could. With this in mind, Rick is confident that he can get us in the door one way or the other. While the cult has plenty of people, they can't exactly hire much professional security. As far as the spirits, I can't say I've got it covered, but I do have an idea. Garbage. Supernatural garbage, mind you, but yes, my contribution revolves around trash. The forces that keep the place going are being carefully cultivated and monitored, kept at a balance to do whatever their crazy plans involve, without spiraling out of control and turned into a Lovecraftian train wreck. I have a suitcase full of half-broken, expired, and otherwise unpredictable pasta Oxford has helped me collect as we've been taking our road trip. If my theory holds, they should be enough to throw the supernatural homeostasis of the place off balance. For a little while, at least. We offered to let Oxford sit the footwork out, but he said he'd had none of it. Wanted to help us see this through. We sit in a scrummy motel, off the beaten path, and knowing tomorrow has a high likelihood of being our last day on Earth. You think we're pulling this off? I ask Rick, as I stare at the stained, cracked ceiling. We stared down the devil. How hard could this be? He replies with a chuckle. That wasn't the devil, I say, trying to keep my mind on anything but tomorrow's events. Probably, right? Rick is loading several revolvers with varying types of ammunition. But it was something, though. And who knows if we're going to see the worst tomorrow. This ain't a suicide mission. I need you two to remember that. We go in till the momentum dies out, and we get the hell out double time. We've got 4 good hands between us. 1 blind guy, and a plan that is cat scratch at best. His concern is actually kind of touching. The fact that those pistols are for living, breathing people, though, brings me back to reality. Did he seem scared to you guys? Oxford says, a bit off topic. The devil? No, he seemed pretty happy to me, I say, shaking my head. Go on, Rick tells him, looking intrigued. Not of us, but of something. Oxford lights up a small cigar as he speaks. If he didn't want us going here, do you really think he would have offered us help? We're talking about a demon at the very least. Maybe I'm wrong, but if something like that is worrying about them... I can't tell if it's too on the nose or absolute genius. But I guess being October, the idea to disguise a haunted location as a spooky attraction must have been pretty obvious. It's 11 at night, and we're waiting on a dark country road, watching for the last of the customers to filter out, wondering how many bought themselves one-way tickets. Most of the people outside are just locals, know nothing about the crazy shit, so we can't go in hard, Rick says, checking the action on one of his many firearms. I hold the small, snub-nosed revolver he gave me in my lap. Its weight metaphorical more than literal. A half hour after the last bored parent has wandered away from the hellmouth mass as an attraction, Rick, Oxford, and myself begin to make our way through the forest and brush to the front gate. We are within eyesight of the gate, Rick crouching low and keeping ahead of Oxford and myself. As we hunker down and wait, something, other than the obvious, seems strange. "Oxford, get your hand on my shoulder. We might need to bolt pretty quick," I whisper. "Why? Afraid it'll be too dark and I'll trip on something?" His answer seems logical enough. Rick gets behind the young man, closing up the cheap plexiglass ticket booth. There's a large knife and a quick conversation. Rick waves us over as we get there, and we see the panicked young guy zip-tied on the floor of the booth. "This guy and 2 others, they're on their way home. We've got about 45 minutes before anyone notices something's wrong," Rick whispers. He then points to the cheap plywood front to the Chimera house. "We have the keys. Anyone we don't want to run into is somewhere inside. Though I'm guessing that part. Kid here says bosses show up at random. It's go time." We take a collective breath and make our way over the packed dirt to the roadway. The shell around the Chimera house was your typical small-town type of haunt. Dangling bats, motor-driven sheet ghosts, and pun-related graves surrounded us. This cobbled-together veneer gives me courage. I open the door and step through, followed by the other 2 unlucky bastards with me. Click. "Don't move an inch!" Rick yells frantically. The cheap door behind us closes, and I wonder what Rick is talking about as I try to follow his advice. I feel something under my shoe, hard, almost like a small stone, but with a slight give. We hear speaker static begin to hum. All around us is UV-painted faces, cotton cobwebs, and fake skeletons. "You're standing on a landmine," Rick says, slowly, masking deep rage. "They saw us coming."
"So glad you 3 could make it, though we have been thinking you'd show up sooner."
The voice from overhead is distorted, the speakers cheap and old. I can tell Rick knows the voice. His eyes widen and dart around.
"Put all your little totems, fetishes, and toys into the bin to your left, if you will."
I look around and see a Halloween-themed garbage container. I make eye contact with Rick to try and see if he has a better idea, but he simply nods. As I drop my backpack full of supernatural errata, I notice that the can is attached to a chute, and any hope of retrieving the collection is dashed as the bag falls out of sight.
"You too, Rick?"
the voice says, and Rick tosses a half-dozen non-legal firearms down the same way. I suddenly feel naked, trapped. Rick grabs a multi-tool from Oxford, kneels, and begins to fiddle with some mechanism in the trap below me. "Step off slowly," he says. I do, and feel my heart start beating again as I step off of the mine.
"Inventive as expected. So, you 3 want to experience our life's work, the epitome of what we are on this earth for? We are more than happy to oblige."
The smug tone drives home that feeling of small and vulnerable. "By the sound of your voice, we know each other, don't we? I'll do jumping jacks on this bouncing Betty here long before I let myself be another snack for your pets," Rick says defiantly.
Richard, my friend, you know where this conversation goes, right? But maybe your friends need a little explanation. All 3 of you have people you care about. You try and run or opt out, we find you, we stop you. Then we make you watch as we throw them through things and places that will make the Chimera house seem tame. The house needs sustenance, And you three with your little struggles and angry spirits and little gods, you are ripe fruit indeed. Make it out, and our pact is over. Or we do it the hard way.
As the voice speaks, I think of an aspect of this that hasn't quite dawned on me. I assumed I'd be taking my life in my hands, and as much as I intend to get out of this intact, it was a risk I was willing to take. But the thought of my friends and family being put through this kind of hell because of my pissing contest takes a lot of the righteous out of my quest to get even. I hope one of us has some kind of last-minute plan, but as the silence begins to stretch out, it becomes obvious we are at the mercy of the cult.
The house starts at the doors to the dining room. Best of luck.
With a squeal, the speakers cut out, leaving our three unwise men staring at the double doors to our fate. There's a sense of vertigo as we open them. The inside is not a family-friendly creeping dining room, but an old, disused hotel lobby. If I had to guess, last time it was active was somewhere in the 90s. We hear the door behind us close, and when we look, it's nothing more than an unbroken wall covered by faded neon wallpaper. I run my head through a few of the more well-known options of where we could be. While not my forte personally, I've always had an interest in other kinds of paranormal activity. Unfortunately, haunted hotels, real or fake, are a dime a dozen. Even just narrowing down the list to what I know in the obvious time frame still gives me 20 or so options. We feel like we're being watched. Scratching noises and whispers seem to be around every corner. Movement at the very edge of vision has us stopping dead more than once. Every sign, every pamphlet, every possible indication as to the name of the hotel has been purposefully defaced. We try leaving. The doors to the lobby are immobile. Oh, shit, I say, as something dawns on me. I walk to one of the small, cramped elevators, and the panel has 3 buttons, their descriptions obscured by decades of grime and dust. I begin to scrub with a shirt sleeve. The first 2 are nothing more than numbers. I see the 3rd, though, and my heart starts to hammer in my chest. "What?" Rick says impatiently. "It's called the Starcade, and it's like an urban legend. See, pasta, it's fairly harmless because the entities themselves are usually very limited in what they can do. But they tend to be more lucid, reasonable. Spirits are usually nothing to worry about because they can do a lot of reality-bending crap, but their minds are frayed and shattered. This place, it's both. Overnight stay Halloween 1988. News reports said a carbon monoxide leak, but locals always thought it was something else. 20 kids hurt. 12 didn't make it. The hotel owner didn't have the concept of taste, and the place kept going. Over the years, it had more than its share of tragedy. 2 assaults that got out of hand, and a handful of tertiary connections to very bad people. The hotel shut down, and with it the arcade. But after that, if you believe certain folks, it'd pop up. A random button on a random elevator in a random hotel looking for new kids. It's a haunted place with a strong will of its own, and direction. Judging by the look on Rick's face, he doesn't understand how bad this is. Well, you got half of it covered at least, right? It's not like that. This is no man's land. This is the kind of thing that people in my circles don't talk about openly because it shows how little we actually know. And this is one of what these psychopaths have put us through. I'm close to a breakdown. Rick makes eye contact, nods, and pushes the button. The 3 of us barely fit in the tiny elevator, and the ride goes on much longer than is needed. The outside of the lift is full of strange howling noises and sounds that are just 1 or 2 steps off of conversation. The doors open into a sprawling, backlit cavern, the sparse arcade machines, and tables spread as thinly as toppings on a cheap pizza. Figures, wispy and thin, step into existence for a moment, childlike faces scowling at us before dissolving into the stale sweat and junk food-scented air. Lights flicker, creating beacons in the darkness. Cigarette smoke hangs thick and stale, catching the illumination, giving the arcade machines an almost lighthouse-like appearance. Far in the distance, we see an exit sign. The place feels crowded, as if we are forever on the verge of bumping into someone. But other than the transparent faces peeking at us from behind cabinets, or under lopsided tables, we see no one else. The other side of the mirror, Rick says as we walk. What? I reply, ignoring the feeling of a hand on my shoulder. It's what this place reminds me of. When the cult had me, the place they kept me, it didn't feel like it was where everything was originating. But at the end, that spirit, it had me there. That place behind the mirror. It felt like it owned that space, that it was made of its wants and desires. Rick shivers as he talks. We pass the same table, with the same selection of half-eaten popcorn and pizza on it 3 times before I mention it. We are in the dim light of a Frogger cabinet, and we can hear the sounds of laughter at the edge of the glow. The floor feels tarry. I brace myself to run, and feel the need to keep repositioning my feet. The massive cavern begins to feel claustrophobic. I hear distant laughter, and behind it, a shuffling, wet noise and coughing, far away but getting closer. The shadows deepen. Soon, ours is the only machine lit. We can see the exit sign, but nothing else. Out of the gloom and the unknown comes a small boy. His face is nearly blue, his eyes red-veined and swollen. He looks to be around 10. He wears a pair of smoldering pajamas and stares blankly towards me. I catch glimpses of things in the shadows, amalgams of the human soul, rage, and confusion. I take off the rose-colored glasses I've been wearing my entire life and understand the effects of being bound on the only eternal part of a human being. This mass of life force and emotion. It's not an interesting phenomenon. It's a tragedy, spawned from a tragedy, with no other purpose than to cause more tragedy. I understand. The child points. Behind me, Rick is lifted in the air, a long waxen hand snaking from the screen of the machine behind us, flickering blue, gripping him by the neck. And then I see it. The twisted brutality of nature showing itself even beyond the veil of life and death. The mass. Those are the victims, minds barely holding on, trying to warn others. The machines. Those only sources of light in the dark. That is where the true evil is, where all of the hate and rage of the amalgam distilled. Rick draws a hold-out pistol and fires into the hand. For a moment it sags. I get ready to grab the man, but the machine cracks and a second hand grabs him around the shoulder. There's a sound of cracking bone, and Rick screams. All around us, I can hear rattling wood, creaking glass, and my mind pictures what types of things are crawling their way from the rest of the machines. Run, Rick says, barely able to produce the words. We do. The sounds behind us turn into a cacophony of remixed souls hating and loving the torture they are inflicting in equal measure. The room we find ourselves in when we shut the door on our first casualty is normal at first glance. A living room. Judging by decor, I'd say late 70s. Any hope of going back for Rick or him catching up to us is dashed as we see the wall behind us again. Is door free? Any idea where we are? Oxford asks, My mind is too busy trying to process the death I just witnessed to reply. I look around and try and see if I can figure anything out. To me, it looks like any other place in the 70s. We sit on overstuffed couches, orange and brown out-of-date fabric, a bit worn but in good shape. We didn't see it appear, but we both agreed that one moment the brass-trimmed oak Ouija board wasn't there, and then it was. I wanted to laugh at the on-the-nose nature, but my gallows humor dried up right about when the only guy who knew what he was doing got torn apart. The lights dim of their own accord, and as we touch the planchette, we can both feel it, a twitching, tugging movement. A door rattles somewhere in the home. The heavy board rotates slightly. How do we leave? I ask. The only question I can think of that matters. The lights begin to flicker. A porcelain bird falls from a shelf, shattering on the ground. The planchette moves, slowly at first, but gaining speed like a disused engine. Oxford, it spells. I try a different question. Why are we here? This time, it speeds from letter to letter. Oxford is still its reply. This thing is just screwing with us, and maybe we should just look for an exit, Oxford says, getting up. That nagging feeling is back. I ask one more question. How can Oxford help? As I do, the man takes a stumble worthy of a viral video, the table spills, and I have to catch him before he cracks his head open on the arm of the couch. What the hell? I say, trying to untangle myself from him. Oxford stands, getting his bearings. Blind, new room, it happens. The house has a dark energy, and each corner seems to hide a leering grin or unseen scratching. We try every door and window until we hit the master bedroom. What we see in there, I won't describe. It was a window into a place no human being was meant to see. The nexus of this place, the balancing point for every thumb in the eye to reality the husk of M has collected. The things I saw, what I witnessed, looking into a peephole God himself would prefer to avoid. They caused physical pain. I felt as if I had lost something by viewing them. How long? I say, as I understand the situation. Beautiful, isn't it? Oxford replies, and right after the handshake. If it helps, your friend wanted nothing more than what I offered. Enough power to exact his revenge and enough time to enjoy it. I turn away from my soul-tearing nexus, and one of the doors downstairs breaks open. Cult members in blue tracksuits, some carrying rifles, others carrying holy books and artifacts begin to enter the house. Can you tell me why? I ask the thing wearing my dead friend's skin. Times are changing, Matteo. The rules are changing. And while these little piss ants aren't right, they are closer than I'd like to admit. I want this for myself. If there's no way to stop the storm, I want to be the first thing to have an umbrella. The bean-wearing Oxford reaches out, touching the vortex. His hand comes back, shifting and dripping like wax. I'm indignant but worn out. Oxford is possessed and gone. One more question before I get killed. You aren't him, though, are you? He's hiding. And you are a red herring he sends out to try and stop folks from looking. I'd guess just about every major religion has a devil in a basement somewhere thinking they are keeping the world safe. Am I right? He smiles, almost proud, the skin of his face beginning to twist and warp into something stretched and angular, inhuman. Very close, Matteo. Close enough that, if I were you, I'd worry about what it means when the devil is on the run. You live today, but let that knowledge hang as an albatross around your neck. Let that lodestone be your punishment. Some things men are not meant to know. As he says this, the thing wearing Oxford grabs me, tossing me into the vortex. Time seems to slow down, and I can feel the touch of thousands of bound souls within the house. Then something greater. The pure will, ancient and evil of the demon trying to wrest control of the place. When I found myself stumbling out of a back door of the Chimera house, I ran, as fast as I could, back to the wood-paneled car, unimpressively flooring it as far away as I could. Kitted out with fake passports and a decent amount of cash, getting some distance and setting myself up wasn't all that hard. What is hard is living each day knowing what I know. Knowing that the fight between good and evil is the tip of an iceberg that we will never know anything about, but is intrinsically tied to the fate of every person on Earth. Don't know what to say, really. Happy Halloween, I guess?